Welcome to Living the Smarter Science of Slim, where we provide a scientifically proven lifestyle for long-term health and fat loss by eating more and exercising less, but smarter.
Eat smarter, exercise smarter, live better. I am so ready for that.
Hey everyone, Jonathan Bailor back with another bonus Smarter Science of Slim podcast. Grinning ear to ear today, even more than usual, because we have the great honor, especially I have the great honor of being joined on the phone today internationally by one of my mentors, someone who I can distinctly remember reading one of his books that I have sitting in front of me back in 1998 and really set me on the path that I am on today about the doing less and getting more when it comes to resistance training, the importance of resistance training, the importance of proper form and structure and keeping things simple. He has been in this business for a long time, has a proven track record. His first article was published back in 1981. He has over 600 articles published in newsstand magazines. His focus has always been on drug-free, genetically normal trainees, or what he calls hard gainers. So we're not talking about those bodybuilders or those fitness models. He has over 40 years of training experience, over 30 years of coaching experience. He's the editor, or was the editor, at Hard Gainer magazine for over 15 years. He's authored 4 books: Brawn, Beyond Brawn, Build Muscle, Lose Fat, Look Great, and book 1 of the new Brawn series, my personal favorite being Beyond Brawn. And we have none other than Stuart McRobert with us today. Stuart, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me, Jonathan.
Well, Stuart, if you don't mind, if you could just tell us a little bit about your story to get started, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, okay. Look, I do prefer talking about the message rather than the messenger, but they do tend to overlap to begin with. So briefly, I got besotted with trying to improve my physique when I was around about 10, 11, 12. I was reading the Marvel comics from the States. I come from England, by the way. So in England there I was reading my Superman comics, Spider-Man, and so on, really craving to do something about my very skinny body. And a couple of years later, I started exercising and was following some of the conventional advice at the time, which was predominantly Arnold Schwarzenegger type training, because at this time, which was in the early 70s, Schwarzenegger was the bodybuilder, and his training methods largely dominated the mainstream magazines. So I assumed pretty much that the methods that make the champion bodybuilder would make me into a champion bodybuilder as well. So I followed those methods, really poured myself into it. I was as fanatical a bodybuilder as you could get, except, well, at the time I didn't actually know about steroids, but even had I known about them, I would never have taken them. But I followed Arnold's routines and similar routines, but they didn't work. And I got very frustrated, and I had a few years of being really disappointed, miserable at times actually, because I just wasn't getting anywhere. And I finally clicked that those methods that worked for him wouldn't work for normal people, especially people without drugs. So I found other methods, which weren't my methods, by the way. They were other people's methods, which I tailored to myself, and I found that, hey, these actually work for normal people. Of course, they didn't build me into an Arnold, but they transformed me as an ordinary guy without drugs. And then I discovered that there were many other people that had followed the same path of disappointment and frustration with conventional training methods. And I decided that I would share the lessons that I learned with other people, and that was how I got started with my writing, which led to the magazine and the books and so on. And you read all of my books, and here I am now.
Well, Stuart, I so appreciate you sharing that story with us, because there's a core message in there that I think underlies all of your work and is so profoundly helpful and non-obvious, and that is the standard method of find someone who looks the way you want to look and ask them what works for them, and assume that that will work for you does not always work, because there are huge genetic differences, correct?
Correct. You see, if you want to consult someone else whose physique might impress you, you must find out about that person's background. If you find out that that person really had a tough time, never used drugs, had various issues of illness, injuries, family issues, work problems, and all the rest of it, if you find someone who actually had all that normal baggage of life, plus ordinary genetics, and made slow, gradual progress, never became a superstar, but became decent, transformed him or herself, then you probably have a good source of advice to consider. But if you find someone who doesn't really have an ordinary lifestyle, had genetic advantages that you didn't, could grow on conventional routines readily, then you haven't found someone who can offer you advice that is appropriate to you. So people must start with appropriate training routines. So if they ask an inappropriate role model for advice, they're going to receive advice that doesn't work for them.
And Stuart, one question I sometimes get asked when I tell that message is, well, it clearly worked for this person or these people, so therefore it will work for me, when in fact the paradigm shift, correct me if I'm wrong, is maybe it worked for those people in spite, like maybe they got those results in spite of an improper routine rather than because of their routine. Like their genetics are so unique that even with these improper training techniques, they'll get good results. But who's to say that with proper training techniques, they couldn't get even better results with less duration?
Correct. You see, these people that are really blessed, I mean, I don't want to give the impression that I'm denigrating these people. These people are blessed with wonderful genetics. I mean, I have no time for drug support, but I do respect people's genetic advantages. Now, because these people have those advantages, it's true that they can still make progress on some routines that are a long way from being ideal. And those people could have probably made the same progress on half as much training, or perhaps they could have made even faster progress on much less training had they trained more in line with the methods that I promote. So yes, what you said is correct.
And Stuart, here's what I think should make everyone smile is intuitively when we say, oh, we're not genetically blessed. Okay, well, clearly we're going to have to train more than people who are genetically blessed. But what we've actually found is the opposite is true. We need to train less. Is that correct?
Well, we need to train less, but less in a smart way. I mean, some people, they do train less and they don't use the right exercises. They don't train hard enough. They don't use correct exercise technique. And they don't supply enough attention to the components of recuperation. So they will still make no progress. So cutting back is a big step in the right direction, but it has to be cutting back in the right way, with the right exercises, with the right technique, with sufficient effort, and so on. So there's a package of considerations here, all of which have to be in decent order.
So absolutely, it's not just training less, it's training less but smarter. And it sounds like there are some key components of that smarter element. You mentioned exercise selection, you mentioned exercise technique, you mentioned sufficient recovery and attention paid to that. Can we dig into some of the key characteristics of those proper approaches?
Yeah, well, starting with the gym side of things, and I'd like your readers, your listeners rather, to understand that everything I'm saying applies to male and female. This is not this isn't a gender-specific thing. I mean, building muscle and strength is not gender-specific, so men and women should be paying equal attention to this. In the gym, and maybe it's especially women that are more guilty of this than men, is that the women tend to gear towards the little exercises, the baby exercises, because they have some sort of concern. I mean, some women almost have a fear thinking that if they put a bit of effort into one of the serious exercises, they're going to wake up the next day and all of a sudden, they've got big muscles. Women should understand that their pace of growth normally is less than even that of a genetically normal man. So women should have no fear that they're going to develop ugly, big muscles, and they should train exactly like a man should. And that should start in the gym with the selection of the bigger exercises rather than the little ones. I mean, so many women and men waste their time on the leg extension, the leg curl, and the adductor, and the abductor, and the butt machine, and all the rest of it. Instead of doing all of that, if they would just learn how to do the squat correctly, and I do emphasize the word correctly, if they would just do that, they would gain more from 2 or 3 hard sets of the squat than they would from 3, 4, 5 sets of all those other exercises I mentioned. So they get more return, and they'd need to do far less training. So, and that is the essence of the method that I promote. Less training done well gives you better results with less time in the gym, so you have a more doable exercise program. And an exercise program has to be doable in order for you to do it long enough to make your progress and to keep it up over the long term to keep reaping the benefits as you age. The priority of exercise is doability. And effectiveness, of course. I mean, just doing it isn't enough. It has to be something that will work, but it has to be built around doability.
Stuart, I couldn't agree with you more around doability. I think so often with anything involving physique transformation, we hear things in terms of next 30 days, next 7 days, 12-week program, blah, 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 blah. Your message hits home with whatever you start today. If you want to continue to get results, you have to continue doing it. So literally, if you do a program and you say, there is no way I can keep this up, stop, do something else. Because if you can't keep it up, it may just be working against you.
For sure. I mean, the number one, I'd say a very common mistake that people make is that they go into an exercise program with gung-ho enthusiasm. They really throw themselves into it. It's invariably an impractical, not really doable program. And after a few weeks, they burn out, give it up, have aches and pains, perhaps a more serious injury, get disillusioned with exercise, give it up, and there you have another failure. And if you were to look at in most gyms, the failure rate, the dropout rate, I mean, it's alarming. So many people start, yet a few weeks later, a few months later, you won't see many of those faces. A year later, you might not see any of those faces because they just go about exercise in the wrong way.
And Stuart, one thing that I think is particularly profound here and that we can grab onto is there's so few areas in life where less can actually be more. Like what we're talking about here is literally take a more, for lack of better terms, simplistic approach. Do squats, do these major muscle movements, do them properly, do them with effort, do them infrequently, and then all this other like gym gadgetry, fad, workout video, all of that stuff can fall by the wayside. You'll have more time, you'll get injured less, and you will get better results. That almost sounds too good to be true, but it's not, right?
Correct, and you can see why a lot of people won't be happy with this approach. I mean, people who are on the commercial side of exercise, because there isn't much to be made out of selling things from the message that I'm promoting. I mean, what I promote works. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But because there isn't much money to be made out of that, because there aren't all the add-ons and the extras and the bits and pieces, this isn't an attractive message for the commercialized side of exercise. And because the commercialization is so effective in distracting people with all its gadgets, gizmos, and whatnot, that people get sucked into this, and they get distracted from the tried and true that will work for them.
And Stuart, one
and
thing...
that will work for them with so much less investment in gym time. I mean, to go to the gym no more than 3 times a week, and in many cases just twice a week, is enough if people do the right thing while they're there. I mean, to go to the gym twice a week, I mean, compare that to the 4, 5, 6 times that many people try to dedicate themselves to. I mean, which are you going to do over the long term? Twice a week or 4, 5, 6 times a week? Obviously, the twice a week, provided it works for you. And if you do it properly, it will work for you.
And I think it's so empowering because while we don't have to, there's certainly this short-term appeal to trying the next Gidget and Gazmo and all these kinds of fun things. But there's also what you describe in your book is this very methodological and sustainable progress. And if we can do a simple exercise, probably the wrong word, if we can take the simple technique of saying, like if I can string together just do this for a year. And I know it's hard for people to be like, okay, a year, oh my God. But if you can make the gradual, safe, sustainable progress that a program like this affords, where you can get in a year, and Stuart, I'd love for you to talk more about this gradual improvements and like doing the math and seeing on paper how much stronger you can get, where you'll be in a year, that's really, really inspirational.
Yeah, you're right. Not many people are looking for the next sort of 4, 5, 6 weeks. They're trying to fix themselves up 2 months before summer starts. And this is not the way to go. Such programs, they encourage haste, people taking chances, people going on crash diets, crash exercise programs, which don't work over the long term, and they often backfire and create so much disappointment and frustration that they end up in long-term failure. But if people would set their stalls out over the long term, well, over the medium term, sort of 6 months to begin with, and then you build on 6 months. And if people would just look at the next little bit of progress, just adding, for example, 2 pounds a week to each of the major exercises. You do that for 6 months, about 25 weeks, there's 50 pounds. You do it for a year, there's 100 pounds. And all of a sudden, that little bit adds up to a lot. And then over the first year or two, people can transform themselves. But they're better off to not think about trying to transform themselves over 2 to 3 months, because that invariably doesn't work for normal people. But if they target transforming themselves over a year or two, then that is definitely realistic, and it's also doable. And getting back to the exercise in the gym, people need to understand the basic sort of planes that the exercises work through. You have a squatting motion for your thighs and your butt. And you have a bench pressing movement for your chest and shoulders and triceps. You have an overhead pressing movement for your shoulders and some of your triceps and some of your upper back. And you have a pulling motion or a rowing motion for your back as well. So that is 5 planes of exercise. Those are the 5 that people should be focusing on. So if they do 1 for each of those planes each time they exercise, and then if they want 1 or 2 smaller exercises, something for their abs, for example, perhaps their calves, then that is basically all they need. And if they would apply themselves to that, and it could be 2 sets of different exercises each week, so you have like routine 1 and you have routine 2. And if people would dedicate themselves to that basic format and just plug away with correct exercise technique, hard effort, minimum sets, good recovery, I guarantee that they will make steady improvement in strength, and that will accompany increases in muscle mass as well. And after a year or 2 of that, especially if it coincides with some loss of body fat, if there was excess body fat to begin with, and you really are talking about transformation.
And Stuart, it seems like we need to look in the mirror and be very clear on our goals. We need to say, am I focused on the short term or am I focused on the long term? Because I think a lot of confusion comes up because there are things we can do in the short term that quote unquote work in the short term. And if our goal is completely short term, well, that may be counterproductive in the long term, but that's fine. But if your goal is long term, you must take an approach that facilitates and adapts to the long term, correct?
Correct, yes.
And another point you make, Stuart, in your book that I really think is empowering for people is the idea that when it comes to strength training and the do less but smarter approach that you advocate, is this idea of you having total control and all the responsibility, and there's no politics, and you don't have to depend on other people to pass you the ball or anything like that. It's one area that you can totally control in your life. Can you talk a bit about that?
People need to understand enough about exercise. They don't need to they don't need to have a PhD in exercise to know what to do. And they just need to know the fundamentals and then apply themselves to those fundamentals consistently, and they will make progress. And this can produce tremendous empowerment. And then people need to get away from searching for more so-called better ideas, and be careful when they read books and magazines and listen to TV ads and all the rest of it, because it's so easy for people to get distracted and to lose their way because they get caught up in all the razzmatazz attached to exercise, and then they slip away from the fundamentals that are guaranteed to work if properly applied. And then they end up going round and around, and through that mill of frustration, that puts people off exercise.
And so it seems like until, for example, we could string together 3 months on the shorter end, 6 months to a year on the longer, more ideal end, a infrequent routine with proper form, with maximal safe effort, where we're doing a squat variation, a pull variation, a push variation, and an overhead push variation. Like, if we are not doing that, if we have not yet set up a life where we can do that consistently for months at a time, worrying, like just simplify your life. It seems like that's your message. Just focus on that. Like, there's enough other complexity. You can simplify this area, and isn't that nice when we can simplify?
Of course. Look, to make it simpler for readers, I think they should, for listeners, if they can boil it down to 5 major exercises. I said 5 planes before, but it's better for people to think about 5 exercises. So you have a squatting motion, a deadlifting motion, an upper body pushing motion. The bench press is a push, an overhead press is a push. And then you have a pulling motion, such as a row or a chin-up. So a 5-exercise routine could be a deadlift, a squat, a bench press, an overhead press, and a chin-up or a row. So there are your 5 exercises. Now, out of each of those 5 exercises, you can find variations. I usually recommend that people deadlift just once a week, but the other exercises can be done twice a week by most people. There are some people that once they're training really hard, and if they're struggling with recovery, and depending on their age and other considerations, there are some cases where some exercises are better off, or some body parts are maybe better off just exercise once a week. It does vary somewhat according to the individual, and it's difficult for me to try to include many variations in such a brief description. But those 5 major exercises really do cover just about the entire body. Everything is either hit directly or indirectly. So if people will become good at just those 5 basic forms of exercise, again, it's a deadlift, a squat, a bench press, an overhead press, and a row or a chin-up for the back. Those 5 basic motions, if people would work on those and get good at them, they won't believe the impact that dedication will make to their bodies, especially if it's combined with body fat loss as well. And really, just those 5 exercises can do so much. it'll be hard for people to believe in this because they've been so brainwashed to think they have to do 3 exercises per body part like Schwarzenegger used to do, blah, blah, blah. This is just bodybuilding hokum. It's just nonsense for the genetically normal, drug-free person.
And while it may seem hard to believe, I would encourage folks just to try it, and also to keep in mind that if we look at the typical exercise routine, it usually consists of doing some form of low-intensity, high-duration aerobic activity, which it's a totally separate topic, and then maybe when you're done with that, walking over into the weight room and doing some sit-ups, doing some curls for your arms, and doing some adductor and abductor exercises where you take your legs and you basically flail them in and out, in and out, in and out. And that doesn't work for most people. And it seems like it's no surprise, as it includes no elements of the simple, proven, and effective routine we've covered so far, Stuart.
Mm-hmm. But I do want listeners to really understand that these big exercises I'm talking about, they do have to be done with correct exercise technique. I mean, if people just go in and just abuse these exercises, they are going to get hurt. I mean, just like they would if they abuse any exercises. But with the really big exercises, the ones that work many body parts at the same time, because there's a higher injury risk with them if they're done in an incorrect way. So, to repeat myself, it's correct exercise selection together with correct exercise technique. The combination is imperative here. Without the correct exercise technique, people are going to get in a mess.
Well, certainly, Stuart, this is an empowering message, a message that has transformed my life and hopefully will continue to transform the lives of the undoubted millions of others you've touched. What's next for you in this arena?
Well, I'm still plugging away, doing more of the same, and I always have a new project in the background that I'm working on, which I am at the moment. And every year or two, I have something else to say related to what I've already said, to try to present the same basic message from a different angle to perhaps appeal to a different audience, to keep plugging away.
Well, Stuart, I appreciate the continued effort. And folks, if you want to learn more about Stuart McRobert and his fabulous work, which has stood the test of time, please visit his primary website at hardgainer.com. He also has 4 wonderful books, the first of which is called Brawn. The second is Beyond Brawn, my personal favorite. And he has Build Muscle, Lose Fat, Look Great, as well as book 1 of his new Brawn series. Stuart, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Jonathan.
Listeners, I hope you enjoyed today's show as much as I did, and please remember, this week and every week after, eat smarter, exercise smarter, and live better. Talk with you soon.
Wait, don't stop listening yet. If you like the podcast and if there's other ways we can help you, please join us in the Smarter Science of Slim support group, which is freely available at the Smarter Science of Slim website, smarterscienceofslim.com. There you'll find all kinds of free recipes and success stories and just all kinds of fun stuff, like how to help your kids go sane and just great community content.
And just one last thing before you go, if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes and up onto Amazon.com and leaving us a review, and then going over to Facebook and liking us, we would hugely appreciate it.